What happens when one of the world's biggest pop stars sits down for what should be a routine morning show interview, only to find herself facing questions that cross every line imaginable? What happens when a host pushes too far, when personal boundaries get trampled, and when a young artist decides she's had enough? Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive television moments in recent memory. A clash that started as small talk and escalated into something nobody saw coming. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about how this whole situation went down. Because trust me, you're going to have opinions about what you're about to hear. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studios in Times Square. The energy was buzzing as producers rushed around making final preparations for what everyone expected to be a straightforward interview segment. Billie Eilish was scheduled to appear on the show to discuss her latest album, upcoming tour dates, and her recent collaboration with a major environmental organization. It was supposed to be the kind of feel-good segment that morning television thrives on, the perfect way to start viewers' day with some positive celebrity news and upbeat music discussion. Host Sarah Martinez had been with Good Morning America for over 8 years, known for her warm interviewing style and ability to make guests feel comfortable. She had interviewed hundreds of celebrities, from A-list actors to chart-topping musicians, and rarely encountered any significant problems. Her approach was typically conversational and friendly, designed to give viewers the sense that they were getting an intimate glimpse into their favorite stars' lives without being too invasive or confrontational. The interview began exactly as planned, with Sarah offering her trademark welcoming smile as Billie settled into the plush interview chair across from her. The lighting was perfect, the cameras were rolling smoothly, and the live studio audience was quietly attentive, clearly excited to see one of their favorite artists up close. "Good morning, Billie, and thank you so much for joining us today," Sarah began with her practiced warmth. "Your new album has been absolutely phenomenal, sitting at #1 for 3 consecutive weeks. Now, how does it feel to have that kind of response from your fans?" Billie shifted slightly in her chair, her characteristic quiet confidence evident as she considered the question. "It feels incredible, honestly. I mean, when you put your heart and soul into something like this, you never really know how people are going to receive it. The fact that listeners are connecting with these songs the way they are, it means everything to me. Let's talk about some of the themes in this album," Sarah continued, leaning forward slightly in that way television hosts do when they want to signal deeper engagement. "There's a lot of vulnerability in these tracks, a lot of personal reflection. Was it difficult to share such intimate parts of your life with the world?" "You know, I think as an artist you have to be willing to be uncomfortable sometimes," Billie replied thoughtfully. "These songs came from real experiences, real emotions, and if I'm not being authentic about that, then what's the point? My fans deserve honesty, not some sanitized version of who I am." The conversation flowed naturally for several more minutes, covering familiar territory about creative processes, musical influences, and upcoming projects. Both women seemed relaxed, and the interview appeared to be proceeding exactly as everyone had expected. Sarah asked about Billie's environmental advocacy work, which sparked a passionate response about climate change and the responsibility of public figures to use their platforms for positive change. "I love that you're so committed to these causes," Sarah said, nodding approvingly. "Speaking of commitment, there's been a lot of speculation lately about your personal life. I know you've always been pretty private about relationships, but our viewers are so curious about the person behind the music." Something subtle shifted in Billie's expression, a slight tightening around her eyes that viewers at home might not have caught but was unmistakable to anyone paying close attention. "Well, I try to keep some things to myself, you know. I think it's important to have boundaries between what I share professionally and what stays personal." Of course," Sarah replied quickly, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't quite ready to let the topic go. "But you're such an inspiration to young people, and I think they look up to you, not just for your music but for how you navigate life as a young woman in the spotlight. Surely you can understand their curiosity about how you balance career success with personal happiness." Billie's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. She had dealt with invasive questions before, but something about the way Sarah was framing this felt different, more persistent than the usual celebrity interview boundaries. "I mean, I'm just trying to figure it out like everyone else. Honestly, I don't think being famous means I have to share every detail of my private life with the world." "But that's exactly what makes you so relatable," Sarah pressed, her smile remaining bright even as her questions grew more pointed. "Young women especially look to you for guidance on relationships, on self-worth, on making healthy choices. Don't you feel some responsibility to share those experiences, even the difficult ones?" The studio audience began to sense a shift in the conversation's tone. What had started as friendly banter was taking on an edge that made people uncomfortable. Billie's media training kicked in as she tried to redirect the conversation back to safer ground. I think the best way I can help young people is through my music and by being authentic about the struggles I'm comfortable discussing publicly. Mental health, body image, finding your voice in the world, those are things I talk about because I think they matter. But expecting someone to share every intimate detail of their life just because they're in the public eye, that's not really fair, is it? Sarah's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. But there was something harder behind it now. Well, I think our viewers would disagree with you there, Billie. When you put yourself in the public eye, when you make millions of dollars from people buying your music and supporting your career, don't you think they deserve to know who they're really supporting? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Several producers in the control room exchanged worried glances, recognizing that Sarah had just crossed a line that morning television hosts typically avoid. This wasn't the gentle probing that viewers expected from breakfast television. This was something much more aggressive. Billie's jaw tightened visibly. I think people deserve good music and authentic artistry. I don't think buying someone's album entitles you to access their private relationships or personal struggles that they're not ready to share. But you've been very open about some personal struggles, Sarah countered, pulling out a tablet as if she had prepared for this exact moment. You've talked extensively about your mental health journey, about body dysmorphia, about feeling misunderstood. Why are romantic relationships off limits when those other deeply personal topics aren't? Because those are my choices to make, Billie replied, her voice remaining steady but growing noticeably cooler. I talk about mental health because I think it can help other people who are struggling. I talk about body image because I want young girls to feel better about themselves. I choose what to share based on whether I think it can make a positive difference. Sarah leaned back in her chair, adopting the pose of someone who thought they were making a particularly clever point. So you'll talk about depression and anxiety, but you won't talk about love and relationships. Don't you think that's a little selective, a little calculated? Maybe. The studio audience was becoming visibly uncomfortable now. Several people were shifting in their seats, and a few were whispering to each other with concerned expressions. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity interview they had expected to witness. Calculated, Billie repeated, her eyebrows rising. You think my mental health advocacy is calculated? I'm just saying that it's interesting what you choose to be vulnerable about and what you choose to keep private, Sarah replied, apparently oblivious to the storm clouds gathering in Billie's expression. It almost seems like you're willing to share the struggles that make you seem relatable and sympathetic. But you won't share the parts of your life that might make you seem more, well, normal. Normal, Billie said flatly, and anyone who knew her well would have recognized the warning in that tone. What exactly do you mean by normal? Sarah seemed to sense she was treading on dangerous ground, but pressed forward anyway. Well, you have to admit that your image is very carefully curated. The baggy clothes, the colored hair, the whole mysterious persona. Some people wonder if that's really who you are or if it's just good marketing. The control room was in full panic mode now. The executive producer was frantically trying to signal to Sarah to change direction, but she seemed completely absorbed in what she clearly thought was hard. Hitting journalism rather than morning show entertainment. Marketing, Billie repeated slowly, and her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. You think my artistic choices are marketing? I'm not saying that. Sarah backtracked quickly, but it was too late. I'm just saying that our viewers are curious about the real you, not just the image you present to the world. The real me, Billie said, and now there was no mistaking the edge in her voice. You want to know about the real me? The real me deals with panic attacks at 2 in the morning. The real me has spent hours staring at herself in the mirror, hating what she sees. The real me has had to learn how to function in a world where strangers think they own pieces of her soul because they bought her music. Sarah's eyes lit up as if she had struck gold. Now that's exactly the kind of honesty our viewers connect with. See, when you open up like that, it's so much more authentic than the carefully controlled responses. Carefully controlled responses, Billie repeated, and something dangerous flashed in her eyes. You think I'm being fake with you right now? I think you're being more real than you usually are in interviews, Sarah replied, completely misreading the situation. This is the kind of raw honesty that really resonates with people. Can we talk more about those panic attacks? When did they start? Are they related to the pressure of fame? The studio fell into an almost complete silence. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something was going very wrong. But the live nature of the broadcast meant there was no way to stop what was unfolding. Billie stared at Sarah for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was deadly quiet. You want me to talk about my panic attacks for your entertainment? For our viewers, Sarah corrected, as if that made it better. Mental health is such an important topic, and hearing from someone like you about how you cope with these challenges, it could really help people, right? Billie said, nodding slowly. And if I said no, if I said that my panic attacks are too personal and traumatic for me to discuss on morning television, you'd probably tell me I was being calculated again, wouldn't you? Sarah's media training finally seemed to kick in, and she realized she was losing control of the interview. Billie, I hope you don't think I'm trying to exploit your experiences. That's absolutely not my intention. Then what is your intention? Billie asked pointedly. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're trying to get me to share traumatic personal details so you can have a more dramatic segment. I'm trying to have an honest conversation with you, Sarah replied defensively. The kind of conversation that goes beyond the usual promotional talking points. Honest, Billie repeated. You want honest? Here's honest. This is exactly why young artists burn out. This is exactly why people in this industry struggle with mental health. Because people like you think that buying someone's music means you're entitled to their trauma, their private moments, their pain. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Sarah was clearly realizing that her interview had taken a turn she couldn't control. But she seemed unable to find a way back to safer ground. Instead, she made the decision that would ultimately end the interview in spectacular fashion. Sarah took a deep breath and decided to double down on her approach. Billie, I understand you're feeling defensive, but I think you're being a little unfair here. We're not asking you to exploit your trauma. We're asking you to connect with millions of viewers who look up to you and who might be struggling with similar issues. Defensive, Billie said, her voice growing sharper. I'm being defensive for not wanting to discuss my panic attacks on live television. I'm saying that your reaction seems a bit over the top for what are pretty standard interview questions. Sarah replied, and the moment those words left her mouth, everyone in the studio knew she had made a catastrophic mistake. Billie's expression went completely still, over the top. Look, every celebrity gets asked personal questions. It comes with the territory, Sarah continued, apparently unable to recognize that she was pouring gasoline on a fire. Taylor Swift talks about her relationships. Selena Gomez discusses her mental health struggles. Ariana Grande has been open about her anxiety. This is just part of being a public figure. So because other people choose to share intimate details of their lives, I'm obligated to do the same. Billie's voice was dangerously calm now. I'm saying that if you want to be relatable to your audience, if you want to maintain that connection with your fans, then yes, there's an expectation of openness, Sarah said, and it was clear she thought she was making a reasonable point. An expectation. Billie repeated slowly. Absolutely. Your fans invest emotionally in you. They buy your music. They come to your concerts. They support your career. In return, they expect to feel like they know you, like you're being genuine with them. Billie was quiet for a moment, and Sarah seemed to think she was making progress. She leaned forward with renewed confidence. I mean, let's be honest here. Billie, your whole brand is built on authenticity, right? You market yourself as this real, unfiltered artist who doesn't play by the usual rules. But then when we try to have a real, unfiltered conversation, you put up walls. Can you see how that might seem contradictory to people? The studio was so quiet now that the hum of the cameras seemed unnaturally loud. Billie stared at Sarah for what felt like an eternity before she spoke. My whole brand, she said quietly. I didn't mean it like that, Sarah said quickly, finally sensing that she had gone too far. No, I think you meant it exactly like that, Billie replied. You think my authenticity is a marketing strategy. You think my mental health advocacy is a brand choice. You think my artistic expression is calculated to sell records. Billie, please, let's not twist my words, Sarah said desperately. I'm not twisting anything. You just told me that my fans have bought the right to my trauma. You told me that sharing my deepest struggles is part of my job description. You called my emotional response to invasive questioning over the top. Billie's voice was rising now, but it wasn't the shrill anger of someone losing control. It was the cold fury of someone who had reached their absolute limit. That's not what I said, Sarah protested weakly. That's exactly what you said. And you know what the really sick part is? You're sitting here demanding that I perform vulnerability for you. You want me to cry on camera, don't you? You want me to break down and share something traumatic, so you can have your viral moment. Sarah's face had gone pale. Billie, I think we're having a miscommunication here. No miscommunication. You've been crystal clear. You think because I'm a public figure, my pain is public property. You think because people buy my music, they own pieces of my soul. You think authenticity means having no boundaries, no privacy, no right to keep anything sacred for myself. I never said any of that, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. You didn't have to say it directly. It's been the subtext of this entire conversation. From the moment you started pushing about my personal life, you've been operating under the assumption that I owe strangers access to my most private moments. The control room was in complete chaos now. Producers were frantically trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial, but the train-wreck quality of the interview meant ratings were probably through the roof. The executive producer was torn between journalistic responsibility and the reality of television business. Billie, I really think we should take a step back here. Sarah tried one more time. A step back. Billie's voice was incredulous now. You want to take a step back after you've spent the last 10 minutes telling me that my emotional boundaries are over the top, that my artistic choices are marketing ploys, and that my fans are entitled to my trauma because they bought concert Tickets. I was trying to have a meaningful conversation, Sarah said defensively. Meaningful. Billie stood up abruptly, and the sudden movement caused several camera operators to instinctively adjust their shots. There's nothing meaningful about demanding someone perform their pain for your entertainment. There's nothing meaningful about treating a human being like a product that people have purchased access to. Billie, please sit down. We can work through this, Sarah pleaded, finally understanding that her interview was falling apart on live television. Work through this. Billie's voice was filled with disgust. You want to work through the fact that you think I'm obligated to share my panic attacks with millions of strangers. You want to work through your belief that authenticity means having no personal boundaries whatsoever. That's not what I believe, Sarah said desperately. Then why have you spent this entire interview trying to convince me otherwise? Billie demanded. Why have you dismissed every attempt I've made to maintain basic privacy? Why did you call my reasonable boundaries calculated and offensive? Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Billie wasn't finished. You know what's really calculated? This whole setup, you planned this, didn't you? You came into this interview with the intention of pushing me until I either shared something deeply personal or had an emotional breakdown. Either way, you get your dramatic television moment. Billie, that's absolutely not true, Sarah protested, but her voice was shaking now, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been systematically trying to break down my boundaries from the moment we started talking about anything personal. And when I pushed back, you told me I was being defensive and over the top. The audience was completely silent now, everyone understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't just a celebrity having a bad interview. This was a young woman defending her fundamental right to privacy and dignity. In the face of exploitative questioning, Billie looked directly into the camera, addressing the audience at home rather than Sarah. I want everyone watching this to understand something. What you've just witnessed is exactly what's wrong with how we treat young people in the entertainment industry. This host has spent the last 15 minutes trying to convince me that I owe strangers access to my trauma, my private relationships, and my most vulnerable moments, simply because I make music. Sarah tried to interrupt. Billie, I don't think that's a fair characterization of our conversation. Billie turned back to her with fire in her eyes. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Is it fair to tell someone their emotional boundaries are over the top? Is it fair to suggest that authenticity means having no privacy? Is it fair to treat a human being like a commodity that fans have purchased the right to dissect? I was trying to connect you with your audience, Sarah said weakly. By demanding I perform my pain for them. Billie's voice was incredulous. By insisting I share details about panic attacks that I'm not ready to discuss. By telling me that my artistic choices are just marketing strategies. That's not connecting with an audience, that's exploitation, disguised as journalism. The studio was dead silent, except for the quiet hum of equipment. Every person in the room understood they were witnessing something that would be talked about. For years to come, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sarah tried one last time, her media training kicking in as she attempted damage control. The only misunderstanding here is your belief that being a public figure means surrendering my humanity. Billie replied coldly. You've made it crystal clear that you think my success obligates me to share every intimate detail of my life. And when I refuse, you label me as fake, defensive, and calculated. That wasn't my intention, Sarah protested. Your intentions don't matter when your actions are harmful. Billie shot back. You've spent this entire interview trying to break down my boundaries. And when that didn't work, you tried to shame me for having them in the first place. Billie looked back at the camera, her voice becoming more passionate. To anyone out there who's struggling with mental health, who's dealing with anxiety or depression or panic attacks, please know that you don't owe anyone the details of your pain. You don't have to perform your vulnerability for other people's entertainment. Your trauma is not content for other people to consume. She paused, her anger giving way to something deeper and more profound. And to young artists watching this, understand that success doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your right to privacy. Fame doesn't make you public property. Making music or art doesn't obligate you to share every piece of your soul with the world. Sarah sat frozen, clearly understanding that any attempt to regain control of the interview would only make things worse. You know what's really authentic? Billie continued, her voice growing stronger. Setting boundaries. Protecting your mental health. Choosing what parts of yourself you want to share and what parts you want to keep private. That's not calculated or defensive. That's self-preservation. She turned back to Sarah one final time. I came here to talk about music, about art, about the causes I care about. Instead, you've spent the entire time trying to extract personal information that I'm not comfortable sharing. And when I resisted, you questioned my authenticity. Billie, please, can we start over? Sarah asked desperately. Start over. Billie's laugh was humorless. You want to start over after you've made it clear that you view me as a product rather than a person. After you've suggested that my fans own pieces of my private life. After you've dismissed my right to emotional boundaries. She shook her head slowly. This is exactly why so many young people in this industry burn out. This is exactly why mental health is such a crisis in entertainment. Because people like you convince us that our worth is tied to how much of ourselves we're willing to sacrifice for public consumption. Billie stood up fully now, and the cameras automatically followed. Her movement, I'm not going to sit here and let you continue to suggest that my humanity is negotiable. I'm not going to pretend that invasive questioning is good journalism, and I'm certainly not going to perform vulnerability just to give you the dramatic segment you're clearly looking for. Billie, please don't go, Sarah said, and there was genuine panic in her voice. Now, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. That's the problem, Billie replied, looking down at her with something that might have been pity. You think this is about what I want to talk about. You still don't understand that this is about basic human respect and the right to privacy. She began removing her microphone, her movements deliberate and calm, despite the emotional intensity of the moment. I hope this serves as a lesson to other interviewers out there. Young artists are not your entertainment. Our struggles are not your content. Our private lives are not your right to access. The interview isn't over, Sarah said weakly, as if stating it would somehow make it true. Yes, it is, Billie replied firmly, handing the microphone to a nearby production assistant. I will not continue to participate in a conversation where my humanity is treated as optional and my boundaries are seen as obstacles to overcome. She looked directly into the main camera one final time. To my fans watching this, thank you for understanding that loving an artist doesn't mean you're entitled to every piece of their life. Thank you for supporting the music without demanding access to the pain behind it. And thank you for understanding that sometimes the most authentic thing an artist can do is walk away from situations that compromise their well-being. With that, Billie Eilish walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving Sarah Martinez sitting alone in front of a live television audience. The weight of her failed interview hanging in the air like a storm cloud. The camera lingered for a moment on Sarah's stunned expression before cutting to a hastily arranged commercial break, but the damage was already done. In the span of 20 minutes, one of morning television's most experienced hosts had learned the hard way that there are some lines you simply cannot cross, some boundaries that cannot be violated, and some human beings who will not be reduced to entertainment for others. What did you think about how Billie handled this situation? Was she right to walk off, or should she have tried to salvage the interview? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that define our entertainment culture.